So today I'm doing some florals, and instead of bringing a big board with me with a single paper that I tape down to the board, I brought what's called a watercolor pad. So all the sheets in this pad are glued down to each other, so it makes it a nice firm surface that holds well. And then when I'm done, I can release that where it's glued down all around the edges. So I've already got my borders on here of where I want to paint. I just have to decide what flowers to paint today. And I brought lots of reference photos. I brought sunflowers, I brought poppies, I brought daisies, and so it'll be just whatever I feel like today. So I'm going to find that out right now. A variety of reference photos. This is a painting that I did at another date that I turned into a watercolor batik using wax. And then I've got some sunflowers. I have lots of sunflowers in my yard, so I take pictures of them. And then I have poppies. I always have lots of poppies because I have them. So I'm going to start with a sunflower today. So I can look at these and decide, okay, what kind of composition do I want? I've got lots of poppy photos. There's a couple daisies in here. But I think I'm going to do something like combining this on the bottom, this more in the middle, and then maybe this one towards the top. So I'll have an uneven number, which is always more pleasing than an even number of objects. So I'm going to get started with that. And I'm just going to start drawing this sunflower. I'm going to start with this one, and I decided I want to place it right down here in the left-hand corner. There's the big middle of it. Mostly curved lines, that there's curved lines in all of this. And if I was putting a stem in, the stem would probably be one of the very few lines that would be a straight line. So drawing is really nothing more than straight lines, curved lines. What you decide to do with those. And the leaves are different shapes because they lay in the flower all differently. And I don't have to be exact about this. I don't think anyone is going to look and compare it to this photo to see that it turns out every little curve is exactly the same as what's on there. So I'll just give these a little bit of an undercolor and let that water gravity pull it down to the middle. This was the darker. I'm just going to give it a variety. Maybe put a little dark in the edge right away. One of the things you don't want to do with watercolor is you don't want to end up getting too much water in there, and you don't want it to be going back into it all the time. So notice these are the ones that I want to keep light. So I'm coming in with some darker colors right now, and sometimes there's some things underneath here. And of course the edges, these flowers aren't flat, so to make them look more three-dimensional, you want to get some darks in between them. If I look back at my reference, that's what I'm seeing. And it's still wet enough in most places. And what I'm going to do next, hold on, I changed my mind. This is drying. a little too much, so I'm going to just drop in some darker towards that middle area to bring that out. Some sunflowers, you kind of see that star pattern in the middle of it. So you see the darks around there. The middle of the sunflower, if you look back at this, the middle of this sunflower is, you see mostly a brown, but if you look around the edges, you see a little bit of reds and pinks, and you see some of the leaves that are behind it also darkened. So that's going to bring that to life if I get some darks in there also. But I often play with this middle part. I love to make different colors in the middle, not just the brown. If you look at this one, this type of sunflower has green through the middle of it, and then a brighter orange than this one has, and then some dark around the edges, which those deep darks I'll put in way at the end. So I'm just trying to get some of those middle values in right now. This middle part, I'm trying to leave some white, so I'm just gonna dab on some water, let some of what's already there flow together, and right now I'm just gonna add some little speckles of red. I don't want to ever take it right straight out of the palette because that's just too strong. That looks about right. So I'm going to just take the end and see how that just makes it. I love that whole idea of watercolor doing that. But I've also left some areas not wet. So those areas, the paint's not going to flow into the areas that don't have any water on them. The reason I like doing sunflowers is because it's fun to play like this. Now notice that didn't spread. That little dot did not spread.
Because that's on a dry spot.
It must be on a dry spot, yeah. Put some down in these corners, especially down on the bottom where the sun's not going to hit. Put a little bit more. Oh, I kind of like that. Look at how that's flowing. I can turn this watercolor block any way I want to. I really like that's happening in there.
Like what, in 7 years? Yeah.
I didn't really like those straight lines, so I can take this brush and I can just soften it out. Bring this down in a little bit. I don't want to do that all over. It's never good to do the same thing all the way around. So variety is, I think, part of any painting. So that middle isn't really dark enough yet. I want that to be really dark, and I want to get in the darks before. I've got this, it's called Venetian Red. So it's a reddish brown, basically, kind of like a brick red. And I'm going to put some of that in. Oh good, it's still wet enough. See, and I put it over the blue.
It gets real dark.
Yeah, real dark. Well, in fact, one of the ways to make a gray, a nice gray, is mixing a brown like that and then just putting it with blue. Because we don't buy gray, we make a gray. So I don't want it to all get muddy either. What would happen if I take the edge of this and just kind of roll it over? And if it gets on some of those petals, that's not a problem. That's okay if they do that too. Because I've got so much yellow in there, it might be a good idea if I mixed a little bit of that in there also. I don't want my spots of white to be quite so big.
Paint.
Okay.
More shadow.
Well, I wanted to get in the darks around it to make this middle stand out a little bit more. And of course it keeps drying, and that's what we find with watercolor. It dries much lighter than what you have started out as. And even that middle's got to get a lot darker. So I've darkened all this around the edge up to here. And now I want to be able to go in. I don't like how that blue is lurking up there, so I'm gonna bring down some of this and again try to just get in some shadows. And then once I have that, then I want to go back in and soften that. You see how hard those edges are. This is much. So I'll just bring that in, bring my brush in along the edge of it. And I said I don't want to play with the paint too much. So after I do that, I'm going to try to lighten it a little bit so it's soft and it's dark towards the middle, and then it's light on the outside without having super dark edges. So I'm using the paper towel to soften also. I use the water. So this is a pretty dark line. I'm just going to run the brush over that. Trying to get those darks in a little bit more. You put a layer on and it just lightens right up. So I've got some underpainting of a lot of color. And you don't really see that in here. You see lights among the darks. But, you know, I've done enough of them that I know what I like the middle to look like also. So I'm just not trying to actually draw a circle, but just put some curved lines in there and hope that this is dark enough. I might mix a little bit of, I've got a real dark brown there, and I'm going to mix it with that pinky purple color so that it comes out a little darker, so that they're not all the same value. And I've got the dark kind of highlighting then the middle. And this is drying already really light also, so I'm going to need to go back in there and do some work. Sometimes you want that paint to move and cover an area, and sometimes you don't. So right now, this is really wet paint on mostly dry. Now, the tip over here wasn't dry because that's all still flowing. This area right here is pretty dry, so these curved lines that I'm making are pretty much staying.